Kate Delaney here with Dr. Linsey Willis. We're talking about her book, Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder. You can see it right here. What an incredible book you've put together. And so many people deal with this. So many people deal with relatives. So many people have disorders themselves. We're going to talk about all of that throughout our conversation here. So welcome. I'm glad you're doing this.
Thank you for having me.
This book, like I said, is an incredible resource. It's an incredible memory to your sister. There's so many things we could say to describe the book. But let's start with your sister's story. So you grow up and everything's fine, I'll say, although there would be some red flags. And at 21, she's diagnosed, Betsy, with bipolar disorder. Talk about leading up to that, what it was like.
Well, she was always very, very smart, and she was very precocious and funny. She had a great sense of humor. She was very creative, and we both participated in different sports as we were growing up. And she was always better at sports than I was. She actually made the gymnastics team, and I didn't. So I always knew that she was better, faster, and smarter than I was. But there was always that little chip or
Something was missing.
something was missing. There was always some kernel of a problem with her. She, could be really nasty out of nowhere, particularly to me, and I always felt that she was favored by my father, and because she was the older one, and of course he always denied that, but. And she was always smarter. She always did better in school than I did. We were both in the intensive work group, and we tested for the very smart group. But she was was mean to me when I was growing up. Picked on me a lot, and I thought maybe that was just sibling rivalry. But later on, I realized it had something to do with the illness.
Wow. So
maybe the illness was slowly developing, and based on what I've read, many of the bipolars are diagnosed in their teens or late teens.
right. So you get the official diagnosis, and what's that like for your family? Because now, you're not living as kids anymore, and it's different. You're off doing your life.
Well, for my parents, it was pretty awful when they had to take her to the hospital when she overdosed on Quaaludes, and that was covered a little bit in the book. But I cover in the book things in her history when she was using drugs, and she was, involved with people in the different towns we lived in that were, smoking pot and carrying on, and maybe she was doing that because that was the beginning of her mania. I don't know, because back then we didn't know. She hadn't been diagnosed yet.
Right. And what's so interesting about your sister is, she was Ivy League educated, so she was smart. It's like you said, she was smart. And there would be times where you wouldn't know anything was wrong.
Yeah, she got into Brown University and went there for a year and then didn't finish. She finished there because I mentioned it in the book, my father didn't want to pay for her to live on campus. And part of the illness is, grandiosity. And everything, she was like really grandiose about everything had to be, rich, and, best of everything. So but then she ended up going for a master's at University of Pennsylvania. So
Right.
she received her master's there, and that's an Ivy League school. But she could have finished at Brown. She was a straight A student. She was almost perfect scores in all her tests, SAT and GREs, and
Right.
she could do all the quants. She could do calculus and all that. And I had difficulty with trigonometry and algebra, but she could do calculus and all. She was just brilliant.
So in dealing with this, and with your family dealing with this, of course, it's about medication, and it's about chemical imbalance, and you talk about this in the book.
Yes.
Heavily, because that's part of what the whole deal is. So what happened when it came to that, when it came to doctors and psychiatric hospitals? Tell us about that.
Well, when she was in Brown at the Butler Hospital at Brown University, as I recall, because I was an undergraduate. She was there for 3 months straight, and that's when they diagnosed her. And as I recall, the two drugs they gave her were lithium, which is what I understand is a mild salt. It's a salt created by Dr. Phoebe, and lithium, or not, excuse me, lithium in a mild tranquilizer. I don't know what the mild tranquilizer was, and it may have been changed over the years, but for 12 years, as I recall, she functioned on lithium and a mild tranquilizer and was able to work, carry on her life, and finish her graduate degree, live with her boyfriend of a long period of time, the man she didn't marry, but the guy that she was with for many years. And then it started to fall apart when she couldn't take lithium anymore.
Right.
And it became toxic to her system. So that was the miracle drug, and she could no longer take it.
Yeah. In the book, you talk about, and this book is, again, Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder. We're speaking with Dr. Linsey Willis. And in the book, it's great. You list how socially, I'm just gonna share this, which you talk about bizarre social behavior. You talk about the fact that you're talking about giving away possessions to newly acquired friends, things for people to look for. Other people look for this too in their loved ones. Stealing money from others' purses, constantly changing her clothes, chugging beverages, asking you for one of your belongings she wanted. Those were the kinds of things. Interrupting others when they're talking, flirting with someone else's spouse, grabbing something out of your hands. That's just a few that you list. And that's part of what you deal with.
And those are just minor. Those are minor behaviors.
Right.
You got to stop somewhere when you're writing this, but very bizarre social behavior. Another example was, I mention it in the book, but I can go into more detail. We would go to this beach called Round Hill Beach in South Dartmouth, Massachusetts, or more the other beach another beach we had, and everybody would bring their towels and their umbrella and their beach gear. She would bring a couple changes of clothes. She would bring her books that she was studying in high school, and she would change her clothes or change the bathing suit, and she'd read her book while everybody else was socializing, and that was almost like a defense mechanism or whatever, but she was, everybody's having fun and she's reading books and changing clothes.
Right.
Oh, and then another time, years later, when she was, well into her illness, she went and changed clothes at Target I took her to, and she changed her clothes out in the open with no clothes on, underwear, no bra, and she's changed her. I says, Betsy, you need to get back into the dressing room. And then she starts screaming at me and telling me to leave her alone. But she's, it's bizarre behavior. She doesn't even care that anybody could see that she's out in the open changing her clothes.
Right. Right.
Bizarre behavior that just, they don't even think about poor judgment in decision making.
Right. And again, these are all red flags and things that are part of what accompanies when you have this disorder. The other part of this that's hard, and you talk about it, and thank goodness for your family, and that's why you say be there, because there was no abandoning her, your parents, you, etc. The financial burden of this is the other aspect. What happened with your sister along the way as far as, well, she has to be in this facility, she can't live alone? You talk about that in the book. What happens when she gets discharged and you and your husband, Frank, take her to an apartment, but she can't be alone, and then trying to get disability, which your mother, thank goodness, was able to get for her?
Well, it started with getting her on Social Security disability 89 after she had divorced her first husband, or he divorced her. And so then she moved in with my parents when they retired to Ormond Beach, Florida in 89. So my mother got her on Social Security disability because my sister had worked in some psychiatric hospitals down in South Florida, and she couldn't work anymore. And for example, she was having an affair with one of the psychiatrists at the hospital. Promiscuity. So she's like involved in this psychiatrist who was involved in another doctor that was treating her in Pennsylvania. So, but, she was able to live with them. But when I finally said, you can't have her live with her anymore, you can't have her live with you anymore, she ended up moving into apartments, and then she would get evicted, and then they'd have to move her to another apartment. We would have to pay the security deposit. And so if you don't have financial wherewithal, you know, those individuals, you can't live on a Social Security disability check, and if you need family to help contribute financially to help you.
Yeah, it's not enough money. And you and I talked about this, and for all the people watching this and of course listening too as well, imagine they're on the street because that's what happens so often. Right?
That's right. And
It's
I know
terrible.
stories of, people who have somebody mentally ill in their family where the person has to move away to another state and get away from where that person lives because the person is paranoid schizophrenic. That's another illness, but they have to get away from them totally because they're afraid of them.
Yeah.
My mother became afraid of Betsy because Betsy tried to hit her with a shoe in her head, and that's when I said, you can't
Can't do
thank
this.
God my father intervened. I said, you can't have her live with you anymore.
Right.
Most of them aren't dangerous, okay? Everybody thinks that, but if you have the financial wherewithal, you can help continue to carry that person, because my parents and I did not want their daughter or my sister living on the streets.
Right. Right.
How can you live with somebody that is your family member that you discarded to the point where that person is living on the streets and we don't know where they're living, how they're living, and we don't care.
Right. I can't imagine that. And again, it goes to the title of your book, Be There. So tell us about the book. Tell us what's included in the book. Amazing pictures, which you'll see some of those, obviously. And then her letters, which I think were so precious that you put this in the book. So writing this was a labor of love. What was it like, putting this together and telling the story?
It was painful, backbreaking, emotionally charged, cathartic. And as I was writing, and I knew there was a purpose to it, and there was a mission, and I needed to get it on paper. I needed people to remember my sister, and it was just, there was so much stored in my memory about her, because all those years of, verbal and emotional abuse by my sister, and then dealing with her all those years and still being there, and all the heartache that it put on myself and my parents, and yet we all still continued to live our lives to the best of our ability. I had it all in my memory, and I had to get it out, and that was part of the healing process. I had to get it out on paper, and thank God I can write.
Right.
So you get it out on paper, and you're getting it out of your system, and you're healing, and
that's what you
and
did.
I could sit there and write for a couple hours every day when I came back to it 20 years later. Every day I could sit down and write 1 or 2 hours, even if it was 15 minutes, just getting it out on paper.
Right.
And and you're remembering all those things that happened, and you're just...
Right, you're doing it. You're putting it together.
You're doing it.
And here's the thing, for you, this is the other part of this, is the person who is caring for the person, which, ultimately your husband was so great about it, as much as he could be. And then you, in the end, have to also deal with your husband with dementia and all of that. How do you keep yourself sane when you're in that side of it?
Well, fortunately, the work I do, in my consulting business, keeps my mind occupied. And then we were lucky we had long-term care health insurance where I had someone coming in 5 to 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, so I could go out a little bit and what have you. And my husband, knew all about it. He was living it with me, me yelling at her on the phone or me telling him stuff, went on, or him experiencing it when we were at my parents' house during the holidays. This was after they were all living in Florida. So you have to persevere. You got to gut it out. You got to take time for yourself. You got to go out and exercise. Do whatever you can to keep your mental health going. If you have work you love, that helps you deal with all this stuff.
Right.
And if you get ill and you're sick, how can you take care of your husband and be there for him and be there for your sister long distance and go visit her?
Right, you can't. You have to figure out, how do I do this?
Yeah. I had to get myself ready every time I went to visit her for 4 or 5 days. I had to take a deep breath and say, okay, what am I going to face now? And I would just, prepare to face, good and bad times, and I just got a lot of hardiness. I've got a lot of hardiness.
And that served you well.
Served me well, and I'm very healthy, thank God. So I
you could do it. Yeah. You figured out a way to do it because, again, it goes to the title of the book, Be There, because you weren't going to just say, okay, I can't do anything else. I can't do any more about that. You say, too, anyone who has a family member, and this is on the back of the book, significant other or friend suffering from bipolar illness can find confirmation they did not cause, cannot control or cure the illness, but they can cope. You call that the 4 C's. And you say the book offers the peace of mind and healing that come from understanding the illness. Is that what you want the takeaway to be for the people who read the book?
I want people who read the book to realize they're not alone and to learn more about the statistics and the characteristics of their loved one, that I didn't know this person might possibly have bipolar disorder, or the person that has it realize what heartache they're causing their parents. And meanwhile, there are ways to cope with it and deal with it and survive everything,
yeah.
and then you can help other people, because there's always hope. There's always another day. My dad, who was on a Navy destroyer in World War II, he took this back from the war. He said, "This too shall pass." So anytime we had a horrible upheaval with Betsy, like being my mother Baker acted her a couple times, getting caught with cocaine where she was living and they shipped her off, just terrible situations. My dad would say, and he was always calm and pragmatic, "This too shall pass." And it's like, tomorrow's another day.
Tomorrow's another day. And you were so much there for your sister. Your parents had passed, and you were there when she passed. And what did you tell her when you were there for those days as she was slipping away?
And she was by then in a coma when I was right next to her on her deathbed, and there was one picture in there. I took the least horrible looking picture. I said, just came to me out of probably from the heavens and God and the angels, saying, "Betsy, you will never be forgotten. You're never going to be forgotten. You will be remembered with this book. I want everybody to know about you and to help everybody. You will never, ever be forgotten." And it was like my gift to her, and her gift to me was staying alive until I got there, waiting for me to arrive. When the doctors told me she's not going to make it, the doctor told me she's not going to be here by the time you come up. You got to come sooner, and she probably won't be here. When are you planning on coming after I canceled the trip I was making a week later? She's probably not going to be here another day or two. The palliative nurse said, "You better say your goodbyes now, because she's going to be gone more than likely before you arrive." Well, guess what? She waited several days for me. It was like a Tuesday, and she lasted through it like a Sunday morning in the middle of the night. She waited for me and lasted that long.
Wow.
For me.
Wow.
Where I could be with her by her bedside. Yeah. And I read to her. I read to her while she was one of the Malcolm Gladwell books. I read to her because the nurses told me that they can still hear you. They can hear it. And whenever I asked her, I said, "Betsy, blink your eyes or move your hands and grab my hand if you know I'm here and you feel me." And she would blink her eyes and she would squeeze my hand. So she was still there, and I'm reading to her. I mean, that was the most gut-wrenching, painful, but who wants to die alone? Nobody should die alone.
Yep, nobody should die alone. Again, an incredible book, Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder, and this is Dr. Linsey Willis. And you have other aspirations for what you could do, because you're keeping your sister's memory alive, and there's some things that are in the future that you're working on, and that, in a way, it's pretty exciting though, right? Because you want to help other people get through some really dark times.
Yeah, I've got some big visions and plans which are already in motion. I realized after doing some research that once the book is published, and you're a nobody author, you've got to put money into it, because you got to pay to play. So I know that. So I paid to play, and I put money into marketing. And then I'm at a wine tasting event. This is when it all came out. I'm at this wine. I love good wine. And this
Me too.
We got that in common too, Kate. I'm at a wine tasting with a friend, a group of ladies, and this friend of mine I met at someone else's Christmas party. she works for this company called Wines for Humanity. So we went to this wine tasting in Fort Lauderdale, and with this beautiful place at the Fort Lauderdale Women's Club, which was really cool because it's like over 100 years old, the original wooden floors, teeny tiny little building in downtown Fort Lauderdale. We're at the wine tasting, and you pay to get in, you have the wine, and you have all this good food, different wines. You buy raffle tickets so you can win baskets of different wines. I'm drinking this wine, and this woman comes up, and she says, "Thank you for being here and for buying raffle tickets. Thank you for being here for my husband's foundation. The money collected here from the raffle tickets will go to my husband's foundation for Lou Gehrig's disease."
Wow,
And then Lou Gehrig's disease, foundation, wine. Wait a second. Aha, light went on. Aha! I got an idea. Why don't I combine a wine tasting, which they give 10% of their proceeds to the charity of your choice, with raffles, and I'll make a gift basket, and my book, and book sales. So I shared the idea with Dana, and I contacted my marketing company.
Right.
And Jessie did research, and she said, no one in the world is doing anything like this. This is a great idea. And that started it. So we've had a couple events already, and then I met the owner of the company, Anton Steinhardt, Wines for Humanity.
Yeah.
And we've got an affiliation, strategic, unofficially legal, written strategic alliance with myself, with Wines for Humanity. I've got colleagues, chocolate company in Boca Raton. Her husband owns a gift store. She's donating the chocolate. Then we got the tote bag. The foundation is now doing business as Betsy Craig Foundation. So my goal now is to sell this book, millions of copies.
Right.
Millions of copies sold. The money from the raffle tickets, the sales of the book, will go into the foundation, which will be given back to the charity. And I want this to go global and viral because mental illness is in other countries. People in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Nigeria have bought my book.
Right.
It's in London. A London bookstore bought it. It's now in the Toronto bookstore showing my book, is having my book on the shelves. So the goal is to go viral, which brings in more money, which you can start giving back, and you continue to have wine tastings around the country.
Right, and then that can help all the people that are struggling that don't have the means to, like your sister luckily had around her, to help them, because they're going to be struggling with that throughout however long they live. Even with the good doctors and drugs and whatnot, there's highs and lows. Yeah.
And if they're lucky enough to live in an assisted living facility, like my sister did, where I worked with the woman in New Jersey, when she was in New Jersey, they found a facility for her in New York, in Spring Valley, New York. She had my parents and I, to provide extra spending money aside from what was left over from her stipend to visit her and buy things for her. The people that lived there with her, the majority who were mentally ill, who used to be people with lives, most of them didn't have anything. They didn't have a family member that visited. They just barely lived on what they had, with new shoes, no new clothes. That money can be used to pay for socks, new clothes, toiletries.
Things they need.
If it really goes big, the vision we were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think big. Think global, work local.
Right.
Think big. Could you just imagine having like enough money raised from sales of this book to create like a foundation, the Betsy Craig Foundation, or a walk-in where people could go to get help?
Be incredible.
Besides the mental health community, something else where they know if it's just for bipolar, or just a walk-in center where
they can get help.
They can get help. You have one in every major city, or a couple. There's not enough of these places. There's not enough places that people could live too.
Right. And I totally agree. I love that vision. Love this book. It's just great. Go get this book. Again, Dr. Linsey Willis. You can see it be there. My lived experience with my sister's bipolar disorder. I mean, that pretty much says it all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.